Na 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 na.
Happy Sunday, this is Jess. I'm here to talk about class and privilege as they relate to genderqueer today. I had an 8-hour lab class this weekend, so not so fancy as last week. You guys are stuck with beanbag cam, and I'm multitasking and doing my laundry at the same time. So, let's see. So I ran into two stumbling blocks with this week's topic. One, whenever I first watched JT's first video, a lot of it was about physical transition. My genderqueer is actually more socially related. My dysphoria is more social than physical. So I was scrambling to try to figure out topics related to my genderqueer in class, but eventually I figured it out, I think. Also, as Sam mentioned, the later you get into the week, it can be good because you have more time to think about the topic and plan, but it can also be bad because other people talk about things and you don't feel like repeating what everyone else has said. So I was trying to figure out what I could say that no one else had access to, and I guess that's just my own personal experience, so enjoy. How I relate to class is a lot like how I relate to gender. They're both systems that I feel like I'm stuck in between or sometimes completely outside of. As far as class goes, I was born into like a working class family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom when I was born, and my dad was making money either through being a construction laborer or a tractor-trailer driver. But when I was 3, he had a tractor-trailer accident and was totally disabled. There was a big, long, ugly workers' compensation case during which we were living below the poverty line. So if anyone wants to reminisce about government surplus cheese and powdered milk, then by all means. I don't know how many people share the experience I had of eating mostly deer meat for a few years at a time. I just remember deer hamburgers, deer meatloaf, deer spaghetti, deer jerky, which is actually not bad. I don't eat red meat anymore, so I'm luckily deer free, but when you grow up in a rural community where people can't help you out with money, they help you out with hunting game. So that was how we ate for a while. We were still pretty poor. I was mostly in gifted classes in high school, so I was mostly in classes with more middle class students in general, like some of the doctor and lawyers' kids from town. So there was some teasing that went on in high school, and I never really truly fit in exactly. Once I moved to college, I guess I got lucky in a sense in that since my parents were pretty poor, I got really good financial aid. So class became less of an issue whenever I was in college. It was kind of almost class blind. There were a few ways in which it kind of entered the consciousness. Like after a while I decided that I wanted to buy a motorcycle, so I was taking the money that my parents were giving me for books, and instead of buying books I was using the ones out of the library, and that's how I got my first motorcycle. Once I left college, however, it was a whole other ball game. I'd been used to kind of being taken care of and hadn't really ever been out in the real world on my own. I found myself unemployed, unable to find a job in my field that I was studying. I went through a period of a few months where I was afraid that I was going to be homeless because of a living situation that I'd gotten myself into. I always knew I had the option of moving back home with my parents, but moving back to Appalachia at the time didn't seem like the most awesome option ever. My motorcycle had broken down at that point, and I was on the bus. I eventually got a job, and I was riding the bus as my sole means of transportation for a long time, maybe almost a year. I've been to other cities where it's perfectly reasonable and acceptable for people of lots of different classes to ride public transportation, but that doesn't seem to be the case here in LA so much. It seems to be a really big class divide. And then eventually I realized it was a dead-end job and I wasn't going anywhere and my living conditions weren't improving, so I joined my union eventually, and now I'm slowly climbing towards middle class, which can be somewhat uncomfortable at times because it's not a place that I've really been before. So where have class and genderqueer intersected in my life? I guess chronologically, I was thinking back to the things that make me feel better about my genderqueer identity, and one of the things is the clothes I wear, being able to dress myself in a way that makes me comfortable. And I was thinking back to my childhood. I had 2 older sisters, and there wasn't money for new clothes, so pretty much everything I wore was a hand-me-down, so I didn't have very much option or choice about what I was wearing. And I distinctly remember the one new article of clothing that I was guaranteed every year was an Easter dress, which was really not the thing I was looking forward to. Class can also play a large role in one's housing and employment situations and the support one receives from within those situations, which is an enormous part of one's life. One of the things that's helped me feel better about being genderqueer is community, and I think that transportation has played a large role in that, both for the good and for the bad. Whenever I was riding the bus more consistently, it was harder for me to go out to events late at night, which is when a lot of GLBT events that tend to be, just because bus service wasn't reliable or regular at those times. Speaking of communities, I've also encountered class prejudice within communities that I've attempted to get support from. Within the past few years, I joined a GLBT synagogue, which has been really great for me and is a really excellent community, but I've definitely encountered some class prejudices there. One person encouraged me to drop out of my electrical program and re-enroll in school for law because I guess my job wasn't good enough. And I've encountered that opinion from several members of that congregation that I should think about doing something different. I've also had one gay man there decided to be my yenta and was trying to find someone for me to date and told me that I needed to cut my hair off in order for him to find me a woman. I also encountered the issue there that every time I show up in women's clothing, everyone compliments me heavily, but if I'm in more masculine or male clothing, people tend to try to ignore it. Another way class has had a role in my life and my comfort as a genderqueer person is in my gym membership. For the longest time, I felt like that was a luxury that I couldn't afford, and it's only been in the past few months that I started going to the gym, and it's made an enormous difference both in my physical and mental health, but also in my comfort as a genderqueer person. I know that the gym can be a pretty sticky subject for a lot of people because the locker rooms and showers and all that are really gendered and it can be really hard, but physical health is just really important. Well, that's a little bit about how class and genderqueer have intersected in my life. Have a great rest of your weekend and keep on rocking.
If I were a rich man, all day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man.
It was relatively class blind, and now I'm being blinded by the sun.